Breaking news! Things are hot in South Florida, and we know the Dolphins have no room for error. There are decisions being made that border on the absurd, cuts no one understands, and moves that show exactly why Chris Grier deflected being fired long ago. The reality is this: if the goal is the Super Bowl, then there's a lot out of place in Miami, and I'll show you why. Mike McDaniel needs some competitive and healthy time, but with the latest cuts, injuries, and a series of questionable decisions, the fans are on edge. What's going on in the front office? Why are promising players being let go while the injured remain untouchable? I'll tell you everything I'm sure of, but before I do, make sure you've already clicked the like button if you've been a Miami Dolphins fan for over 20 years. It's good to see fans of all ages. If possible, comment something like, "Go Dolphins! My heart bleeds aqua and orange." Now, definitely, because what comes next will get any Miami fan's blood boiling. Alright, let's get straight into it. The Dolphins have officially trimmed down to their final 53-man roster, and there are some jaw-dropping surprises. Let's not sugarcoat it, some of these cuts were shocking. The release of tight end Pharaoh Brown raised plenty of questions. Miami had specifically gone out to get him over other free agent options, and now he's out? That's a questionable use of roster moves. Another head-scratcher? Matt Dickerson. He had a solid camp, showed real promise, yet Grier gives him the boot. These aren't just minor decisions, these are signs of a GM who's been skating by on thin ice for way too long. Among the waived players, wide receiver Eric Ezukanma and linebacker Channing Tindall are probably the two biggest names to watch. Ezukanma, once a promising piece of the WR core, is now tossed into the waiver process. Tindall, a third-round pick from just 2 drafts ago, was supposed to be part of the linebacker solution. Now he's gone. If these aren't signs of poor talent evaluation, I don't know what is. Let's also talk about the physically unable to perform PUP list. Liam Eichenberg is officially on it, meaning he'll miss the first 4 weeks of the season. That's a brutal blow to an already shaky offensive line. And if that wasn't enough, both offensive lineman Andrew Meyer and kicker Jason Sanders are headed to IR. Again, first 4 weeks. So who steps in? Well, the Dolphins already worked out 4 kickers: Eddie Pinerio, Greg Joseph, Zane Gonzalez, and Riley Patterson. Of them, Patterson reportedly impressed the most. But here's where it gets more interesting. The Dolphins might not even carry a kicker on the 53-man roster right now. Instead, they could elevate one weekly from the practice squad. This kind of maneuver shows they're desperate for flexibility, but at what cost? Now here's where the drama really thickens. Miami is reportedly one of the teams in contact with free agent cornerback Asante Samuel Jr., who's recovering from spinal fusion surgery. He's aiming for a mid-season return, and if healthy, could be a game-changer. But let's be real, banking on someone returning from spinal surgery mid-season isn't exactly a safe bet. It reeks of desperation, and again, it's another Grier move that could blow up in our faces or miraculously work. And let's not ignore the interest in former Ravens cornerback Jalen Armour Davis. With DC Anthony Weaver's Baltimore ties, that connection makes perfect sense. Another name flying under the radar is punter Thomas Morstead, recently cut by the 49ers. He was consistent last year in Miami, and many fans would argue he should never have left. While Jake Bailey won the punting job, don't be surprised if Morstead returns. You want consistency? Go with the proven guy. And let's not forget how the waiver claims process works. Miami sits at 13th in the priority line, meaning there's a solid shot at snagging talent. Yet last year, the only player claimed was Grant Dubose. That's it. With the amount of movement around the league right now, not using that 13th spot aggressively would be another huge miss. Are we really going to sit back and let other teams scoop up talent while we wait on injury-prone veterans? Speaking of trades, Cam Robinson, a solid tackle, is reportedly on the block. If Miami's serious about protecting Tua, this should be a no-brainer. But again, we'll see if Grier has the guts to pull the trigger. Also floating in the rumor mill, running backs like Travis Etienne. He'd require a trade, sure, but can you imagine him in this offense? Unreal potential, but it requires actual aggression from the front office. At the end of the day, depth decisions are complicated, but if the Dolphins want to contend, they can't afford to whiff on these final roster spots. Players like Cam Wake and Zach Sealer were once overlooked by other teams. Miami struck gold there. But you can't live off past luck. We need smart, bold moves now. Because when you really start unpacking this 53-man roster and how it came together, it's hard not to feel like we're on shaky ground. The Dolphins' strategy right now screams patchwork. Instead of reinforcing weak spots with proven talent, we're watching a front office shuffle pieces like it's a puzzle they can't quite solve. And that leads us back to one name: Chris Grier. The fact that he still has control of personnel decisions after so many questionable drafts and inconsistent acquisitions is baffling. The margin for error this season is razor thin, and the decisions being made now could either push this team into contention or derail the whole season before it starts. Let's take a closer look at the situation on the offensive line. With Liam Eichenberg out at least 4 weeks, the depth is already being tested. And instead of going all in on a proven veteran, we're hearing whispers about maybe pursuing guys like Dan Skipper. Nothing against Skipper, but if that's your emergency plan to protect Tua, you're rolling the dice. We've seen what happens when Tua doesn't get protection. The offensive line has long been Miami's Achilles heel, and here we are again, entering the season with more questions than answers. Now, regarding special teams, Jason Sanders going to IR is significant. He might not be elite, but he's consistent. So what's the move? Bring in a carousel of kickers for workouts and then potentially keep none of them on the active roster? That level of improvisation might look clever on paper, but if you find yourself needing a 50-yarder to win a division game and your practice squad elevation botches the kick, then what? This is the kind of thing that separates contenders from pretenders. Good teams are proactive, not reactive, and the ripple effects of these decisions don't stop there. The potential signing of Asante Samuel Jr. is exactly the kind of risky, splashy move Greer is known for, but is it the right one? A player coming off spinal fusion surgery, who won't even be evaluated until October, doesn't exactly scream reliability. Sure, if he's cleared and makes a comeback, it's a high reward. But when the defense is already dealing with key injuries and the secondary lacks depth, can we really afford to wait and hope? There's also growing concern about the backfield. While we know Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane will likely carry the load, there's little room for error if either goes down. And we're hearing names like Martinez being waived, again, depth sacrificed for roster flexibility that may not pay off. The Dolphins can't afford to be caught thin at such a critical position, especially in a conference loaded with offensive firepower. And the irony in all this? Some of the most intriguing options now available aren't even getting attention. Jalen Armour Davis, for instance, could be a steal. His physical traits, 6 feet 1 inch, 4.3 speed, make him a rare breed. And he's coming from Baltimore, where DC Anthony Weaver knows his upside. But there's competition. Other teams are circling. Will Miami actually make the move, or just watch another opportunity slip away? Then there's the situation with punter Thomas Morstead. Let's be honest, he should have never been allowed to leave. And while Jake Bailey winning the job makes sense on paper, Morstead brought veteran consistency that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. This isn't just about field position, it's about playoff-level game management. If this team is serious about playing deep into January, every single position matters. Every single one. Even the wide receiver situation is murky. With Eric Ezukanma waived, it feels like we're wasting promising young talent. The dude has flashed potential, and in a system as fast and dynamic as McDaniel's, there's no reason not to have a guy like that in the rotation. Instead, we're back to hoping no one claims him off waivers so we can stash him on the practice squad. That's not strategy, that's wishful thinking. And now we wait to see what happens at noon tomorrow when waiver claims start going public. Miami sits 13th, a prime spot to snag talent. The flexibility is there. As Barry Jackson pointed out, players like Bonner and Ashton Davis could be moved to IR after the 53 was set, freeing up roster space. So the big question is, will Greer use that leverage wisely, or will this be another year where Miami is silent while other teams get better? Because make no mistake, other teams are getting better. Jacksonville, Baltimore, Detroit, they're not waiting around. They're pouncing on talent, filling gaps, making